Master Chief returned to Planet Reach after its destruction and after Halo 1 to save 6 Spartans, including his very own Fred and Kelly, that were stranded for weeks deep inside Reach's titanium mines after the planet was glassed. This is a really fun story, and it has a lot to do about Reach's post-apocalyptic wasteland, so let's go ahead and get into it, guys. This video is supported by Audible. Snag yourself a free Halo audiobook right down in the description below. So what I'm reading from today is in fact Halo lore and is read from Halo First Strike, the updated 2012 version. So if you want to read the whole book yourself, which is full of juicy lore, then pick it up on Audible, again linked down below. Now, during the fall of Reach, Master Chief, if you don't know, was busy doing space ops and ensuring that a navigational crystal that had the location of Earth was destroyed on a UNSC compromise station. Now, Kelly and Fred, meanwhile, were sent down to reach the surface, and they wouldn't be coming back for quite some time. And they went down there to protect the overrun orbital defense generators that which protected the surface from the Covenant's full fleet and might, and also glassings. Now, on the way down to the surface, the Pelican was shot down, and Fred ordered the company to jump out, increasing chances of survival. But even then, 4 Spartans died upon impact, and others were too injured to move. And even Kelly was on the verge of death on the land and impact, requiring an organ replacement. Now, fun fact, the map in Halo Reach's DLC, Highlands, is actually the same map that this happened in the lore. So, to clarify, technically Blue Team was Chief and Linda up in orbit, and Fred's team was, at this point, actually Red Team, but we'll just refer to them as the survivors. So these very important generators were overrun by thousands of Covenant ground soldiers, even though there were tons of Spartans present. So eventually Kelly, Fred, Vin, Isaac, and William, along with some other surviving Marines, met at Castle Base via a Warthog and met up with Dr. Halsey, who was already there and was escorted by June of Noble Team, if you guys remember that scene. So she's there now on the last day of Reach. Now, this would be the beginning of them being stranded on Reach after August 30th, which was also the same day, of course, that Noble 6 met his fate. The last day on Reach, and they meet up with Halsey underneath the ruins of Castle Base, stranded on the wasteland. Now, Team Gamma was in similar condition, however, they weren't able to reach Castle Base, and instead they hid in the mountains using guerrilla tactics as opposed to conventional frontal assault like during the battle because, well, Reach was lost. So Gamma emitted the Ollie Ollie oxen-free transmission E-band radio, hoping surviving Spartans would see that they're alive. So it was 0800 10 hours, August 30th, 2552. Dr. Halsey greeted Fred, Isaac, Vin, and William into the base. Now, Will grunted as he didn't like his formal name, and it actually annoyed Spartans that Halsey knew who they all were despite the armor covering their faces and bodies. She just knew these Spartans. She knew how they walked, their individual gestures, and how they acted, and would never actually call them by their Spartan number. Fun facts. But anyway, she shut the vault door, and the Spartans were sealed safely for the time being underneath Reach's wasteland under Castle Base. Now, the Spartans followed Halsey through these dark concrete hallway with tall ceilings, and Fred explained that no, Reach is not safe, it's been overrun by forces, and they failed in their mission of defending the orbital gun generators. So basically, Halsey and Fred just kind of caught up. She asked about Master Chief. Fred doesn't know, and what he was doing last was, securing a nav database from orbit before the Coveys could get to it. So now walking past a curved concrete wall with old rebellion flags hung up on the wall, sort of hung up in a way of having conquered the rebellions, I guess, Fred says something really alluring here, and it actually plays into a lot of the story. He says, "Something isn't normal about this Covenant invasion. They've won, but they aren't glassing the entire planet, at least not completely as near as I can determine. They've only hit the poles in a portion of lower latitudes, and they've had digging equipment in position over this facility." So Halsey used a password named I shall do not harm to enter the medical wing, and the group followed her into this bright lit room, and Kalmia, if I said that correctly, it's an AI, she's actually Halsey's experimental personal AI, a replacement for Cortana for the time being, and Kalmia confirmed that there's stocks of blood plasma and tools to remove the Monir armor, since the Spartans did in fact need some surgery and patchwork, because Fred had a torn Achilles tendon, kidney contusions, William had a cracked tibia and internal bleeding, bleeding, and yet Fred and Will were actually in the best shape. Vin had broken fingers, and she had a herniated disc, and Isaac had both shoulders dislocated and reinserted incorrectly. Ouch. And although Kelly was by far in the worst shape, bleeding in her liver and right lung was completely collapsed, the fact that she was still walking and fighting was just absolutely shocking. And Dr. Halsey, even though she is a civilian, the Spartans respect her as a superior. Halsey suspected that maybe the Spartans viewed her as a mother figure of sorts, though she doubted that any Spartan would view anyone outside of their team as family, not even her. While patching up Kelly and printing out a new lung and liver, Halsey overrode her AI Kalmia and forced her to hack into a restricted database for Kelly's medical data, and she would find a rather unsettling AI appear and announce her violation of UNSC military security and that the authorities have been notified, although it doesn't matter much because there's no authorities left on Reach. So the annoyed AI named Arquil actually threatened them, her and the Spartans, by saying that he could pressurize the room right away and release narcozone gas to paralyze them. And Halsey quickly typed in a kill command, having designed every third generation smart AI on Reach, knowing all their tricks and secrets, just like we saw in Spartan Ops, and just like that, deleted Ackerson's AI just with a little console code. And Halsey was curious about what Ackerson was up to, and it turns out that, of course, it was the Spartan 3 program. But moments later, loud thunderous thumps could be heard from above. The Covenant had started digging and shaving off the top of the mountain that they were inside. Being in this abandoned Oni base was somehow more intimidating than facing the Covenant to Fred. It drove home the point that the Covenant was winning. The Spartans loaded up with these powerful magnums preparing for the Covenant's arrival because they were trying to get down inside the mountain. What for? We'll find out soon, but they were actually using detonations, like bombs, to dig. And the Spartans came to Halsey, whom was actually almost killed by a support beam that had ruptured from the top of the ceiling and actually came down near her. And the Covenant was so much closer now that they decided to take an elevator shaft even deeper into the planet's ground. Will and Halsey grabbed food, water, medical supplies, but the doc also refused for the Covenant to be able to get the Oni records, so without asking anyone, she activated Operation White Glove, wiped the systems, and also triggered a detonation right after asking Kalmia to wipe herself. So they have 3 minutes to escape the Oni base deep down into the old titanium tunnels. Now, if you don't know, Reach is technically the second most important planet to humanity, at least as how I see it, because during the war, it was very rich in deposits of titanium, which was used to build UNSC warships, which is actually one of the reasons why the Covenant went easy on glassings and Reach, at least in certain locations, because they also wanted that titanium, and also they didn't want to destroy foreigner artifacts because Reach was very rich in them. Also, Reach was where a lot of UNSC warships would be crafted. Now, the team frantically organized to escape the Coveys, now likely having to watch out for Coveys even cloaked elites. And sure enough, after Kelly kicked a can of white dust, revealed 4 outlines on their motion sensors of Covenant stealth elites hiding in the dark hallway in the way to the tunnel. So Kelly opened fire, the elites returned fire, they fell dead, one last elite vanished and had no sensor contact, which was very unusual since elites and their pride meant that they would jump into death's way, even though it was foolish and that they knew they were going to die. It was for a sake of pride. But it wasn't normal behavior for especially an elite to escape a battle like this. But anyway, they made it to the old mine tunnel vent exit, and soon after entering, the base's 3-minute timer went off and the whole mountain Oni base exploded from within itself. So now where we pick up next is Halsey and the Spartans have been stranded on Reach for 8 days now. It's now September 7th, 2552. The Covenant has now stopped using explosions and now using constant but gentle scraping equipment as they steadily removed the top of the mountain, and they were getting closer to the Spartans, but also what the Covenant was looking for this whole time and why they haven't glassed this mountain: foreigner artifacts. All the Spartans were successfully patched up, including Kelly's new partial lung, and they even had new Spartan armor components. Then had a new shield system, effectively doubling her strength. Will had a better tracking system, improving his accuracy up to 1,000 meters, and the doc was now working on Fred, adding new sensors to boost the sensitivity of his motion tracker. While scouting the tunnel, Fred came across a corridor showing a beautiful foreigner structure glistening with gold symbols, but his inner voice told him to be careful. Kelly, Vin, Isaac, and Will jogged up to Fred, along with Halsey, to inspect the structure, likely what the Covenant was looking for this whole time, and what Ackerson was looking for too. The corridor emptied onto a landing that overlooked, well, basically the largest room ever and that Fred had ever seen, over 3 kilometers in diameter, a 100-meter drop down to the floor, a massive holographic solar system, almost basically describing a control room on the Halo ring, I think, but they came up to a glowing gold material, a fist-sized crystal no bigger than your hand. Suddenly, thousands of targets appeared on Fred's sensor for just a second, and a loud, thunderous boom from the Covenant drill penetrated the room. Everything went dark, all except a single ray of Reach's sunshine, or what was left of it, pouring in, and so did the Covenant. A dozen elites floated down the shaft, firing while still in the air, and the team had to pull back. Halsey grabbed the crystal and hung on to Fred. His tracker showed dozens and then hundreds of targets all behind them on the great chamber floor, acting sort of like a tide of unstoppable power. And the Covenant realized that they took the crystal and they seized fire, likely in fear that they would damage what they are calling the Holy Relic. The team retreated more into the corridor. Okay, so now where is Master Chief? Well, after Reach was destroyed, the events of Halo 1 would take place. Master Chief would meet 343 Guilty Spark, eventually destroy Installation 04. You know the story, but at the end, he was on a longsword. What happened right after that? Well, right after that, Chief had met up with Sergeant Johnson and other survivors on a Pelican, and then captured a Covenant ship named the Ascendiant Justice, and then set course for Reach to save Dr. Halsey and his team members if they were still alive. But losing that ship, fun fact, the Ascendiant Justice, was part of the reason why Thale was dishonored, because Blue Team later would go on to destroy a refinery, killing millions of Covenant and hundreds of ships all in one day. So anyway, as Master Chief, Sergeant Johnson, and some Marines, including an ODST, were on the Ascendiant Justice just outside of Reach's orbit, they saw how badly Reach was. How basically from pole to pole, the whole planet was in fire. Hurricanes of black spiraling smoke and destruction laid waste to the entire surface, but they missed a spot. Chief knows that, well, the Covenant don't really miss when they glass, but the Covenant seemed to be interested in one region on Reach in particular, so they decided to get closer and investigate. Although the Covenant Armada had left Reach by now, there was still hundreds of dropship-sized fighters like Seraphs and I think just Phantoms and Spirits, and a dozen cruisers left. Cortana detected a Spartan E-band radio, and Chief ordered his team to gear up and get ready, that they're going down to Reach's surface to rescue the survivors. So keep in mind that it is now September 23rd, 2552. That means that Halo Reach's events have been long gone. They've already happened. Halo 1 just happened. And now Master Chief has returned to Reach after Halo 1 to save some Spartans. Now, as Cortana was in charge of the Ascendiant Justice up in orbit, Cortana analyzed the Epsilon system, which is the system that Reach rested in, and discerned 3 important things. The first one is that the Covenant warships had consistent and regular orbits around Reach, sort of like patrols, only being 13 heavy cruisers left and 3 carriers left in the atmosphere, so the Armada was pretty much out of there. Second, a blind spot in their patrol patterns would give time for Chief to extract his team. And 3, she noticed that at the North Pole that the Covenant had dissected UNSC ships up in the orbit, tearing them apart like an army of ants eating dead prey, and actually using that titanium to build a large platform. And honestly, it doesn't say this, but I wonder if the Covenant would even use the Infidels' ships to work on their own, like melting down the metal and using it to build their own warships. But clearly, the Covenant had something in mind for Reach other than just destruction. So as Sergeant Johnson, Chief, and the others had left on a Covenant dropship from the Ascendiant Justice down to the place where the Spartan E-band radio was going on, Cortana actually heard the AI on the ship, the Ascendiant Justice, cry out, "Infidel." And Cortana immediately shut it up, began tearing it apart. This is my ship now, and basically murdered the Covenant AI. But the message was already sent. Infidel was sort of used as a Covenant code word that the ship the Covenant ship had been captured by humans. And soon after, the Justice was surrounded by ships, and threats started pouring in on the radio of Coveys and elites, just saying, we're gonna kill you, we're gonna destroy you. And Cortana actually quickly just started firing plasma, tearing apart several cruisers, and Cortana quickly would flee away from Reach and hide inside the Orc Cloud, more or less being impossible to track or detect. It would take hundreds of years to track her. Some elites actually found their way on board during the initial attack, and she had to flush them out through the vent system and shut down the corridors. So meanwhile, Reach's atmosphere was scorched. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of raging firestorms, black char where forests used to lay, basically hell. And Chief sent a counter signal to the survivors that planned to set down the dropship for evac. Chief went out by the dropship by himself, only to encounter a neutral contact, and out came a Spartan Anton. He led Chief to rally up in a cave with Grace and Lee, two more surviving Spartans, along with Admiral Whitcomb. They all caught up. Chief explained what happened in Halo 1 Installation 04, and the Admiral then explained where Red Team and Halsey probably are, which is under Oni Castle Base. And so they set course. So Castle Base rested on Minchite Mountain, where now Master Chief and others were getting ready for close quarter combat with swarms of Coveys. So they made their way there, and aboard the dropship, Whitcomb and Chief descended into the Covenant drill hole, making a tight fit, and to a large room that Halsey and the others saw earlier, where there was hundreds of jackals, grunts, and a few elites clearing out a cave-in with no expectations of an ambush. And Chief jumped out first, followed by Anton, Haverson, Locklear, and then the Admiral, Sergeant Johnson, and Grace ambushing the Coveys, and they initiated this huge epic firefight where then Kelly, Fred, and Will came forth, as well as Dr. Halsey, whom was still holding onto the crystal, and they made a quick reunion. And at this point, Isaac and Vin actually are not present because they had died, but now swarms of enemies surrounded them on every level of the room. So this huge epic firefight took place between 6 Spartans and the other survivors versus thousands of angry Covenant. It looked like an angry ant hive, the book described, with overwhelming forces. So the evac dropship came down from the drilled hole on the top of the mountain and eased in. The survivors quickly jumped on board, and although the dropship was obviously captured and thousands of Covenant soldiers could shoot this thing down pretty quickly, the Covenant ceased fire because they know that their plasma could very well destroy the holy relic. And the crystal had been laid down, defied gravity, and actually began to change into this cool greenish geometric shape. And the dropship successfully left the hole, left the mountain, and began to ascend back to orbit. But it wasn't over because Seraph Covenant fighters were still on their tail. They refused to fire, and they started to box in the Phantom, which was far slower than the Covey Seraph. So they really had no chance of getting away from speed. But the Phantom, they decided to ram into the Seraphs, knowing that knocking a couple of them aside, and that didn't really help because pretty much every single Covenant soldier and ship knew about the holy relic taking off from the planet, so they all started making their way to the chase. Now at this point, Cortana noticed that actually Reach's Covenant forces had now tripled. A lot of Covenant members are flooding back into Reach, and here's something that's really cool, is that Cortana created the first kind of ship, but also did the first kind of thing ever in Halo lore, which was a Covenant and UNSC ship making contact without trying to kill each other, and she actually fused the Ascendant Justice and the Gettysburg into a UNSC Covenant hybrid ship. And Cortana made them both compatible with each other. And the reason for doing this was, well, her cover was blown. They knew that the Ascendant Justice was taken, but they also know that Chief has the crystal. So basically, as Cortana's hiding away in the debris field, she is planning to make the shortest slip space jump ever, one of only 3 kilometers, to basically swoop in, snag Chief, and get the hell off Reach. Now, remember, at this point, every Covenant ship in the system was onto Chief's tiny little dropship with Dr. Halsey, 6 other Spartans, Sergeant Johnson, a few others, and yet they couldn't shoot them down because Covenant orders was to not fire upon the holy light, the relic, and anyone that did would be annihilated, that the Covenant would kill their own if they shot at the dropship. So the Covenant's plan was actually to corner the Phantom, box them in, use a grapple hook book and take it by force with precision instead of using plasma, but likely, taking it from them physically. So Cortana's jump was already going to be crowded with coveys surrounding the dropship. I mean, it sounds pretty ridiculous from what I read in the book, and she charged up her plasma turrets, now piloting the hybrid Justice Gettysburg ship. She jumped in, initiated fire, shot down 4 surrounding cruisers. Chief's dropship landed in the bay, and bam, rescued. Find out what happens next in Audible's 30-day free trial on the Halo novel Halo First Strike, which of course includes a lot of interesting details I couldn't fit into this video without it being super long. It was pretty long already, but link for that down in the description. It's totally worth reading, or listening rather. First Strike is the only book that covers events on Reach after its destruction. Maybe Fall of Reach, but I'm not too sure about that. But anyway, I had to skip a lot. Guys, if you want more videos like this about Reach and after Reach's destruction, then be sure to let me know by liking this video and commenting down below what you thought of these events and what you would like to see. Also, by the way, this is kind of like a research project for me because I am making an animated series about events after Reach, much like this video. And they might even tie in with some of the events that we talked about today. So hopefully that's not too much of a spoiler. But here's a link to the Lost Wolves. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your time, and I'll catch you in the next one soon. Take care. Peace.